What's the next topic?
I think the worst thing, the worst things that happened with Drumline was that, like, we had a drum room. So I don't know if you had a drum room, like, for all of the bases, like all the marching stuff, basically.
Yeah.
But, like, that shit was fucking airtight. So people would plug the vent and then smoke weed in there all the time. People would like turn off the light, and if you turned off the, you literally couldn't see into it, like, because of the glass. People would have sex in there so much. It was so fucking, and it was always fucking Drumline people. It was all. It was in
drum rooms always smell like fucking nasty, like, I don't know, sweaty teenagers.
It always smells like sweater weed.
All right, next topic. What is it? Yep.
Okay, let's talk about the federal budget, because there's like 4 things there.
Yeah, brother.
Yeah, that's one. I think Puff recommended that, right?
Yeah, I think I recommended it.
I think the budget is actually exciting. We got 25 million for researching gun violence for the first time in 20 years. I mean, that's amazing.
I think also a really good topic embedded in this topic, which is the part about tobacco, like the increase of the age requirement for tobacco to 21. I think that's actually an interesting topic, like as to whether people think that's like a good thing or not.
Yeah, that's another part of it. Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, like, I don't know. I think in a perfect world, we should probably ban like everything until you're 25. Or like until your brain is fully developed, or 25 is the average age for males, at least.
Maybe. I don't know.
Like, that's a bit.
I don't know if I'm comfortable like limiting the autonomy of people until they're that age.
To me,
a brain being fully, you'd have to argue that a brain being fully developed is going to be synonymous with, you know, the level of autonomy,
like agency. Yeah.
Itself, and I don't see how
not just that, but also like for me, it's a matter of like practicality as well, right? Like, for example, the reason why I'm for lowering the age of drinking alcohol is because you still have a shit ton of kids doing it, and all you're doing here is preventing them from reaching out, calling an ambulance, contacting their school, or maybe if something goes wrong, because it's like, oh shit, I was doing something I wasn't supposed to do. So I feel like you're actually like harming the populace in that sense, because instead of teaching responsible drinking or allowing them to get help when things go a little bit too far, you're essentially like limiting it instead.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, like in Canada here, in Ontario, when you turn 18, you go across the border to Montreal and drink. It's the, you know, it's, well, same with the neighboring, like in the States, people literally cross the border into Quebec to just to drink. And, you know, it's, you're not going to stop kids from drinking or consuming any sort of product just by increasing the limit,
the
age limit. So I'm not
verify that it's bad for people under 25 to like be engaging in drug use or alcohol use or whatever. Like, I think it's probably different than making the argument that there should be punitive measures for doing so, right? Like,
I think also
that's more of what I was getting at, right? That like, I mean, and if we do have like, well, I don't think punitive measures should be taken. Like,
no, for sure not.
Reformation changes should be made. Like,
wait, hold on. How old are you?
I'm 21. Why?
Right. Do you not think that you are autonomous enough to decide if you want to drink alcohol or not in a safe manner?
I don't think that it's good for me to be able to legally, because it may damage my brain. It's not that I don't enjoy the right or that I don't think I'm that autonomous. It's that I think that it's probably not a good thing to be putting drugs into your body while your neurons are like actually maturing.
Well, I don't.
Like,
this sounds like some pseudoscience to me. I am not at all convinced that during the stage of brain development that you're actual, like, you're somehow at a far greater risk of harm. Like, the difference between.
Wait, but that's true.
Wait, what? What do you mean pseudoscience? That's
true.
just like
that's definitely true.
Smoking weed.
Please.
No. He said up to 25.
Yeah, your brain.
Yeah, your brain stops developing.
And so you're telling me that someone's going to be more harmed by having like a drink at 24?
Maybe not like a drink, but like if they didn't have any drinks at all, or if they didn't have any drugs at all input into their system, they wouldn't have any change to their.
I asked about drinking. I'm not.
Drugs.
I think drugs. I'm concerned specifically about drinking, like having a beer, like let's say once a week. Do you think that impact is going to be incredibly, or is going to be negative at the age of, like, let's say 24 in comparison to something like 30?
No.
Obviously 24 is going to be less than like 18, but
it's going to be less, but it's still going to be
like, because I absolutely agree up to like like 19, right, or maybe 21, right, but 25, which is the limit that you set, which is why I asked specifically what your age was, right, and it's 21. So, but do you really think that the harm
is also
of that is
kind of just an average?
I mean, your prefrontal your prefrontal cortex or whatever doesn't finish developing, or does it even after even 25? There's people that say until 35, right? But most scientists agree that like around the 25 mark, it's pretty set in stone.
Well, that can be true, but then we have to corroborate the idea that like alcohol might impede that development.
Exactly. That's what I'm asking for. Because I've heard that before, but I've never seen any evidence for it, which is why I called that pseudoscience. Everyone.
But that's
I know for a fact marijuana does.
And like
even as an avid,
that's why I asked
I
specifically
don't have
about
a study
drinking.
like on hand, but I thought that was like kind of.
Well, I've heard people say that, and but I usually hear this from like my boomer like aunt or something, you know.
Sure, yeah.
But
and
that's
so
not
why.
why.
Like, where do you see that? And I've never, seen any sort of like studies done on that sort of thing, which is why
I do want to bring up something here.
But I agree with drug use 100%. Well, not all drugs, but like a fair amount of drugs. Absolutely, I agree.
Well, I mean, alcohol is a drug, so it's weird, like legal versus illegal drug. If you want to.
No, but I'm talking about drugs that have been specifically studied on that impact, like marijuana has.
Well,
sure.
It's kind of logical as well. We know that if you mess with like brain development before it's like fully developed, you're gonna have effects, and you know that like literally alcohol affects brain development, and it just like you can kind of like I'll find a study if you want, but I mean like it's kind of like a logical conclusion. No, if you are taking drugs or alcohol or whatever that has shown to affect brain development, and your brain isn't fully developed, then your brain will be affected.
Well, the one study that I find, like when I immediately Google it from NCBI is, I mean, not good for my point, because I actually didn't ever research this either. Is that, what is it here in the abstract? This includes both action-oriented involved in obtaining rewards and inhibitions. Its major role is to integrate and interpret inputs, which talk about the prefrontal cortex from cortical and subcortical structures. This includes the post-recent harm the individual. Given the central role, it is no surprise that alcohol has profound effects on the function. Oh, sorry. It is no surprise that alcohol has profound effects on the function of the prefrontal cortex. So,
but is that
like, that's not about the effect.
Being drunk?
Alcohol has a profound effect on the function of the prefrontal cortex.
Well, yeah, when you're under the influence of alcohol.
Yeah. It's not about damage. I thought it actually said the opposite, which would suggest that it can't damage it because it doesn't affect it. So
but we know it does.
Like it affects it, but is the effect equivalent to damaging?
Does it affect the developmental
which is what I'm skeptical of.
But I'm looking for that.
I don't even know if all this is relevant to the point though, because even if it is.
No, this is a side conversation. Absolutely.
Yeah, sure. It's like
I do want to bring up a fact here. Right, I do want to bring up a quick fact here, and I'm not sure why we're now like trying to like increase. I question the timing of adding this increase in the age restriction for tobacco. I have a question, or I have a suspicion that it's for re-elections, right?
No.
However, we're at the lowest, like all-time low, like young adult smoking rate right now. It's like 10% in 2017, which
really
back in 2011 it was 18.9. So
shit.
it's been on a steady. Well, I was just gonna say it's been a steady decrease for a long time now. So I don't know.
I would disagree.
Sure.
Wait. IRI has been trying to get in.
And seeing like how many, maybe not in the immediate future, but in a couple years in the future, how many people are going to be addicted to Juuls.
Well, yeah.
Exactly.
Wait, let IRI go.
IRI, you wanted to jump in? Yeah. Go ahead.
Does this number cover? Sorry.
Real quick, Synth. Yeah, sorry. I just want IRI to be able to go.
Does this number cover like?
Wait, hold on, buddy.
IRI,
go ahead. IRI.
Yes, IRI, go. I'm done.
It's because of flavored vaping. That's it. There was an uptick in young people starting to get addicted, and it's become a big issue. And so they said, look, we're trying to change things, but adults cannot buy flavored vapes now except mint and tobacco. So they're pissed off. So they say, we'll raise the rate. And then maybe less young people get addicted, but at least adults can buy it, which is a huge market. That's the only reason they're raising it right now. That's it.
It's just for vaping.
It's literally for fucking Juul writing a check saying, do this, please, so we can keep selling. Because Juul voluntarily withdrew their Mango Rush and all that jackass stuff. But this is it. This is their idea. We'll regulate the market some more, and then we can keep selling our really addictive product to adults.
So what you're telling me is hashtag we vape, we vote, correct?
Yikes.
Well, yes, there's a lot. There's a lot of
adults
out there that don't want mango flavored Juul right now and can't get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think like the whole point of vaping, at least when it was first starting out, was to get people on like something that didn't have as many carcinogens, something that was a lot safer, because vegetable glycol and propylene don't do shit to your lungs unless you're fucking like inhaling it every second. Like it was a move to like get people to go away from cigarettes and go away from smoking, which Juul has like effectively fucked up, because the pods that they use, the amount of nicotine that's inside of it is like really comparable to the amount of nicotine you would get from using like just smoking regular packs. And that goes down if you go to different systems where you can get lower amounts of nicotine. But other than that, yeah, Juul's like really fucked up the market. Like it's really bad.
Wait, I don't
it's more addicting than cigarettes.
I don't know. Okay, first of all, I don't know if that's true. It might have more nicotine, but let's be very clear here about e-cigarettes. They are better for you than cigarettes by far.
Well, yeah.
Sorry, am I breaking up or is?
No,
they're better. They're better for you, Dan. But it's much easier to get addicted to mango flavored vaping than some random cigarette. You know what I mean? So it brings in more people getting addicted.
Okay, so to be clear, and this goes an interesting take. I feel like I've been at this conversation before. So do you think that banning mango vape is a good idea?
In the current moment, yes, because millions of kids are getting addicted and the addiction rate's going up.
I agree. Next question for you. What type of people do you think typically vape or smoke cigarettes on a socioeconomic scale?
Cool kids.
Poor people.
I think this is across the board. I think even upper middle class kids.
No.
It's poor people, guys.
It's poor people.
For the most part, poor people.
For vaping?
For vaping and smoking.
Yeah, all of them.
Yep.
Vaping is for the common man. Right?
So a conversation we had in one of these
for me and you.
I'm a true working class fellow.
Yeah, a conversation we had in one of these things a while back. I don't remember.
Vapors will bring about the revolution for sure.
Was should we ban sugary drink? Should soda have a high tax on it? Right? And there's a lot of people that push back saying no, there shouldn't, because that only affects poor people, and now you're going to take more of their money towards this. So it's a very interesting debate. If you're in favor of banning mango Juuls, but not in favor of a soda tax.
Oh, I'm in favor of a soda tax.
Yeah, I am too. I think it's.
I think it brought down childhood.
I agree. We should make it so that people buy less fucking soda.
Yeah, but why should poor people like bear the brunt of any sort of like?
But they're not bearing the brunt. They just drink water.
Well, they might keep buying it and then pay the extra tax, right?
Yeah, but don't fucking keep buying it. That's the whole point. I mean,
well, they might. They
will buy it. They will buy it. But we can agree. We can agree that there will be less people buying soda if it is more expensive on average. We can agree that, yes, some people might be so addicted to their fucking Coca-Cola that they might drive themselves into debt purchasing 2-liter bottles of it and fucking Sierra Mist and shit, or fucking drink.
Possible.
But by and large, it'll mostly just be like people be like, oh, this is too expensive now. Let me buy something else.
Oh, also, I forgot that a lot of America.
Well, hold on. I wanted to throw it over to. Whoa. I wanted to throw it over to Gutian. I saw you wanted to hop in on this one.
Oh, I'm just curious to know if anybody was against the ban. Was it a complete ban on vapes, or was it just like a partial ban?
I think it was a ban on flavored vapes, right?
Flavored.
Yeah.
So there's not even a ban
against the ban though.
There is no ban. There's a couple states that have banned it, but federal level, no.
Is anybody against the ideological nature of the ban? Then I guess.
Yeah, I think so. Usually, when like we're talking about like whether or not we should ban things that are harmful to people, I think those bans should, or like that restriction should come from the top, should come from top-down measures as opposed to like.
I think I would support a ban. It's just that if you will get caught evading that ban, you should like go to jail for it.
So it's
I mean, what?
It's a decriminalization.
Wait, Pixie.
The thing about e-cigarette people being lower class, like I just searched that up. It's not true. There's really like no statistical difference between like people who are higher socioeconomic class using e-cigarettes and those the lower. But interestingly enough, if you're more educated, and I guess that makes sense, you're more likely to switch over to exclusively e-cigarettes.
What percentage of those people wear fedoras, though? Pixie doesn't say that.
But no, I don't think. I would say it's the educated bit. I think is that educated people tend to probably have more money, right?
Yeah,
so that they can then afford e-cigarettes, which cost more on average than regular cigarettes.
No.
Yeah, it seems like higher rates of education.
Do they cost more? I don't think they actually cost more.
No, they don't cost.
No, the barrier to entry when it comes to vaping is higher.
Entry.
I see.
Yeah, like you have to spend like $100 or $50 on a nice system, and then you can use.
How much it costs for an e-pipe though?
And
I've run into this problem
over time whenever you buy juice.
Like a nice Gandalf looking e-pipe like costs so much fucking money.
What? A Gandalf?
It has to match your costume.
Yeah, no, because I want to fucking have a little like fucking pipe to be like, and like.
No, I don't know what the fuck Gandalf pipe. Oh,
yeah, but like we're trying to appeal to poor people. They're not gonna buy the fucking Gandalf e-pipe.
I'm talking about my person. This is my truth, and you're not letting me speak my truth as a wizard.
Okay, buddy, say how much you really need the e-pipe, dude.
I mean, dude, they're like $400 though. It's fucking ridiculous, man.
Holy shit!
I'm being discriminated against. And that's really. I think that's the biggest problem with like there should really be tax incentives towards people who make like wizard-shaped e-pipes. I think. That would be
the biggest problem facing America.
That would be the platform. That'd be the platform that I run on as a pro vape.
Corn, soybeans, Gandalf vapes.
Well, can I ask a question? If the age is raised to 21 for all tobacco products, would the people who support flavor bans still support it, or do you think it's okay now?
Wait, ask that again. I'm sorry.
So I support the flavor ban right now with the tobacco age at 18 and all these young people getting addicted. But if it goes up to 21, it kind of changes my mind a little bit.
I think
personally,
if you just do a flavor ban, you're gonna make a black market for it. That's it. Like
I feel like this is kind of a regressive way to go about preventing people from getting into like tobacco or vaping.
For sure.
We can kind of look at how we've created or how the government has tackled tobacco use already and why we see the decrease that we do. We had ad campaigns that were government funded that were making sure that the people knew like the negative consequences of tobacco, which was really, really effective. There's been studies on that. Yeah, I think like educating people, putting like warning signs on these things. I think even warning signs on like overly sugary like processed foods and stuff like that would be good too, right?
Totally.
We talk a lot about like a sugar or a soda tax. I'd rather just put like a warning label or like educate people about the harms of like sugar and naturally they would consume it less. I don't know.
Yeah,
so I don't know. I
that way
think
you're not backing your
this, like this reduction thing here is actually over here in New Zealand. There was actually studies recently with regards to smoking cigarettes and for binge drinking in regards to alcohol. And it's found that like the total number of people has reduced quite drastically in the past. I think it was 20 years or so. The number of people, like young people, engaging in binge drinking or in smoking has dropped by I think it was about 10% across the board, 10-50% across the board. And it's mostly been down to a generally higher level of education with regards to the health effects of those kind of thing, and people having more awareness of what they're going into that kind of thing, and having awareness like the ability that there is a choice around that kind of thing. So like the education tool I think is the biggest one for like anything instead of like a flat out ban. I think flat out bans are a terrible idea.
I mean, if you want to reduce consumption, it seems really weird to do that with punitive measures. That seems like it's only ever going to hurt the people who are purchasing the product in the first place.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think there's I would have to do more research or whatever, but I think there's something to say to like banning just flavored bans across the board Because, like, you know, it's when you start a vape or whatever, they're easier to take down than cigarettes, right? It's like a cool flavor. And initially, if you don't know much about it, you kind of just think, oh, this isn't that harmful. It's just like water vapor and some nicotine, right? So I think that there is something to say about like making it, I guess, more unappealing to the youth, or to people in general, right? But
gotta
when
have
it
that
comes
black lung thing, right? On the package.
It's popcorn lung and it's bullshit. It wasn't even with fucking that was with THC, and it's because people
Yeah.
bullshit.
Like, yeah, also, I mean, is there a showcase
pod.
to show that like vaping is significantly more of a health hazard than almost any other like currently legalized?
There aren't. Well, there are no longitudinal studies because it hasn't. Vaping has only really been alive for like 15 years at most. Like there's
Sure,
no
but, like,
good studies on this.
My big issue here, argument-wise, is like if you're gonna like argue for like we should like do this to like this kind of thing, then I think we should do that to across the board to like everything that we think of as like as a potentially harmful thing, right? So the alcohol should be on the same kind of cover, probably.
Yeah, should you ban? Should you have flavor bans? Should you have like fucking like Mango Rush, like fucking I don't know, Four Locos? Should that not be allowed? Like in the same vein.
I guess to me the question is like how accessible the product is as well, right? Like alcohol is like pretty.
I mean, we could open this up to like a
accessible.
lot of things though. Like, what about cheeseburgers? Those are bad for people, but we still let people have cheeseburgers even when they're 5 years old or whatever.
Yeah, it's two problems in here, right? We don't know like the long-term effects of vape. We don't know if it's gonna be like very minimal or if it's gonna be like really bad, right? We don't know if it's gonna be like lung cancer bad.
But even then, we do know the long-term side effects of like childhood obesity, and we still allow children to consume like puff shakes, said like burgers.
I'd also like to caution with one thing. Okay, saying that we don't know the long-term effects of vaping, all true. It's science. We have a good understanding of what happens when essentially there's only 3 ingredients minus flavoring inside of when you vape. You have propylene glycol, which you don't even need to have, vegetable glycerin, and nicotine. Nicotine is basically caffeine plus addictive. It's a stimulant. Vegetable glycerin is in a ton of shit that we already eat anyways. And propylene glycol, I believe, is used as a preservative inside of a lot of things that, like people with asthma, the inhalers they do. I think that is already propylene glycol.
Yeah, I think so.
It's bullshit. Vaping, I would not be surprised if vaping was completely safe as having a coffee every day. Now, everything in moderation.
Well, I don't know. I used to have that point of view, and then I read some studies about how just like literally inhaling like water vapor constantly or like on a day-to-day basis can have some effects of the like lining of your lungs. So honestly, like I'm not sure because although I agree with you that the ingredients themselves are like probably like non-harmful or whatever, I don't know if the actual action of like inhaling that on a constant like day-to-day basis.
And we have science as well to sort of support us there, right? You're saying it's science and we have a good understanding. We don't have a good understanding of what exposing your lungs to water vapor consistently actually does. We don't have beyond that point,
there's harm,
we don't have any longitudinal studies for that, whereas we do have longitudinal studies for what consuming caffeine grinds mixed with water does to your body, which is very little, right, in terms of negative effects. Your stomach was designed to carry to be able to carry coffee beans and coffee beans and water, whereas the lungs were not designed to have water vapor consistently interacting with them.
Even if there's harm and we can demonstrate that using science or whatever longitudinal studies, it doesn't necessarily dictate whether or not we should allow people to engage in that in that consumption, right? Like we have to ask, where do we draw the line, right?
If it has to be severe harm. I agree completely, but
for sure.
But I'm just pushing back against the notion that we simply because the ingredients don't in the current form, if you were to eat them, don't actually fuck with you. That doesn't mean that inhaling them as vapor does not fuck with you because those are two very different things. That's the only.
I'm just making sure that we're all being even-handed about this because we even sell pressurized air canisters in the form of whipped cream canisters, right? Or people snort them and they do whippets, right? But we don't regulate whether or not people can buy whipped cream.
But the reason why I think it is an important
is that okay? What was wrong with that? Is that okay?
They do for instance they regulate just on this point. I'm sorry for this, but when compressed air cans they make it so that you it's much harder for the complete computers, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of them actually were forced to put.
Do you even need to be 18 to buy it?
No, you don't. And they have shit in it, so you can't inhale it. They have whatever the
to make it taste bad.
No, it doesn't matter. People still do that shit.
No, but they use whipped cream. They don't use fucking compressed air canisters. They use clean computers. They use other things because those companies that just sell.
Sure, maybe
know,
I used the
I've-
wrong terminology, but people
I've
do.
witnessed someone
you
inhale
cannot-
a lot of computer cleaner and then nod the fuck out. People
I haven't
will
really
use
kept up
whatever
on the
fuck
huffer
for
meta,
inhalants.
honestly.
Wait,
That's a meta I
people
haven't-
actually inhale? Wait, I'm pretty sure there's shit in there that's like designed to be bad to inhale. Like
correct.
Oh
That's
yeah,
the case, but like I mean,
It
no,
doesn't
but not
matter,
like not in a
though.
way that a whipped
Fuck.
cream canister isn't,
huffing.
right? Like,
super
or it
bad,
might just be a
It-
tasting
it-
agent.
it
Actually,
doesn't
might just be a
matter.
tasting
I
agent.
mean, it might be unpleasant. People might not enjoy
effectively-
doing it as much as they used to, but like it's still people still do it for recreation, right? I'm just asking, like, why do we not like put the same limitations on these things if we're interested in putting limitations on things people can
Well, this
consume that
is
might
what
harm
I
them?
was gonna argue, right?
Well, I
That
disagree with you.
it really depends on. Okay, it really depends on first, like the amount of people doing it. Second of all, like the long-term effects, and like third of all, how I guess effective this policy is or not, right? So sometimes like I'm in favor for, I don't know, like having people be able to sign up for combat positions in the military at 18. But I'm not for legalization, but I am for legalization of alcohol consumption at 18, right? Because one is probably going to like lower the amount of people like signing up for the military, or at least like definitely stop people from risking their lives in that sense. The other one is going to allow people to get more help. And the reason why I'm making this like standard now is to make the argument that sometimes banning some things works and sometimes it doesn't. I think that when it comes to like this whole idea of like sugary drink, like the consumption of like unhealthy foods, et cetera, if there is, and there is, right, data that talks about having a small tax on it makes people like less likely to consume it, then I'd be for it as long as there's other options that people can go to. Otherwise, you're just punishing poor people from getting the food that's more accessible to them, right?
You just, all right, real quick. I gotta take off, guys. It's pretty late. It was fun being on, but I'm gonna leave. And it was nice being on the show.
Love you, Dan.
Boomers got their bedtime. We all understand.
Good to see you, Dan.
Yep.
Thanks for coming, Dan. I appreciate it.
No problem. Have a good one, guys.
And I gotta follow my friend Dan as well. I gotta get up early for the Bernie AOC rally tomorrow. Fired up.
Oh,
but thank you guys
awesome.
for having me.
What time are you streaming that, right? What time?
I am. It starts at 12 p.m. the rally with music and stuff, but I'll be interviewing people like 10 a.m. something like that. I plan on getting there about 2 hours early. 10 a.m. Pacific.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Nice. Hell yeah.
Cool beans.
Thanks for
Good
joining us. I'm
anyway,
really what do I call you? IMI? I think that's shorter. Saying I'm really important every time is like so.
Yeah, you could say IRI. Some people say that.
Or IRA. Yeah. All right, buddy. Thanks for coming. It's always good to have you, dude.
See you guys.
I feel like I'm gonna.
I see IRA.
I'm joining the train. I'm gonna head out too. My boyfriend comes in tomorrow, so I need to prepare. He's flying in.
That's cute.
So, yes. I'm Rem the Bath Boy with an I. Okay, goodbye everyone.
Hey, good meeting
Have
you.
a good night.
Hey, thanks for coming, dude. Hell yeah.
Bye, Rem.
All right, we yeeted the landlord. Let's go. One step closer.
Oh no.
Yes,
Never did talk
Praxis.
about communism, did we?
Let's talk about communism right now, actually.
Fight me.
No, I've
Oh
told
no.
talk, he can do it to me one-on-one. I'm not doing it 1v10 or some shit.
I don't think anyone here is like super opposed to like actually discussing it. That like I don't know if anyone here is like especially adversarial. That's not me or MindWaves. So like,
Sure,
and I don't think we have an
issue I normally
interest in
have
being.
is that it's like me versus like 2 or 3 like right wingers, and then just all of the dem socks just kind of sit there and just do nothing for like 2 hours.
Well, yeah, but see, but the
Like,
only people,
which
the
is,
only
like,
people
just
that
a
can
waste of
attack
time,
you
right?
is a malding dad and a fucking pretend wizard. So I mean, you're fine, right? You're like you're.
Oh no, no. Well, I was thinking
Pixie
more
probably
about, like,
won't
I didn't
attack
want to like.
you, I feel like
I just didn't want you guys to just be sitting here just for like 2 hours doing nothing, right?
That's fair.
It was
That's
a
fair.
general trying to keep like a topic that everyone could be involved in. You know,
That's considerate.
like if you want someone to take over, like we could have done it. Me and Rem could have just gone for 4 hours about fucking communism or some shit. Everyone would be bored as shit. Okay.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been very fun for some of the guests, I'm sure. Me included.
Seriously, like,
yeah,
Pixie, what was the
having,
ban thing? Like, what example of like recreational stuff do you have that like was banned that was like ended up being a beneficial ban?
Oh no, I wasn't just saying like recreational stuff. I was saying like I was using the U.S. military isn't an example of recreational stuff, right? But the point I was trying to get
we're
across
talking
is
recreational
that
things, right?
yeah, no, I'm
talking
not
about
for
efficacy, right? Because you can't ban a hamburger. Like you can't ban hamburgers because like
They're
the
too popular,
accessibility, right?
I
Like
know
how
what
would
you
you?
mean.
Right, like because you can't
right
ban
wing.
beef.
Yeah,
you
I'm
can
just talking
ban
about
beef.
advocacy too. I'm just asking for consistency on this stuff. Like if if you're super opposed, for example, to like teenagers consuming like a flavored vape product, like, you know, does that position lend itself to you being opposed to other things? That's all I'm trying to say.
Well, I mean,
that's what I was trying to argue that, like, or what I was going to is that sometimes, like what we were talking about earlier before, the barrier to entry for like vaping is higher than cigarettes, right? So like a cigarette packet can cost like $2 to $3. If you want to vape, like from what I read, like the minimum is just like 40 or more. So you know,
how much is a pack of cigarettes? Doesn't a pack of cigarettes cost like $10?
It's like
Definitely
$10, yeah.
Yeah, it's like $10. It's not. Yeah, no, like they don't fuck around. Like that shit is heavily fucking. Yeah, it's like 5 to 10.
Okay, because
for like a pack of cigarettes, it was like $8 or $9. Yeah.
Okay,
it's like it's not cheap. Yeah.
Yeah, because I was gonna argue. Yeah, I was gonna argue that it costs like, you know, a decent chunk of change to get a vape pen, and then even like more decent chunk of change to get the cartridges for it, right? So it's not like the average kid like has that much money to spare, but just a thing to keep in mind, I guess.
I mean, well, it's the whole like immediate benefit over prolonged benefit. If you save up the money to get the vape, then like you're not gonna have just also vapes. The way that nicotine works from vapes, at least as far as I can tell, is like a bit different. It hits you like a bit differently than cigarettes do. It's a bit more immediate with cigarettes, but like it's sort of more instant satisfaction with cigarettes, and they're cheaper like upfront, so you don't really feel the cost upfront.
Also, from what I read, like a single like vape cartridge has as much nicotine as a package, right? But at least, and this is anecdotal, I'd have to do more research. It's like faster to also go through a cartridge than like a whole like bag of cigarettes, right? So you're like, you know, it's not just like this one-time investment cost. It's like continuous spending of money over and over again that I don't think a lot of kids have necessarily easy access to. So that's why I was saying that there could be an argument that, you know, let's say like banning like flavored vape or whatever might make it even less appealing for kids to get it, because it's like, okay, shit, I'm spending all this money, and then on top of that, I'm not even getting a good flavor. I'm getting like shitty ass like whatever, you know.
Sure, I think I'd look at it more as like a case of like a political ideological like consistency across the board. For me is normally how I view it more, right? Where it's like, if you have a position of like a generally liberal or libertarian position when it comes to like people like consuming recreational stuff that might be hazardous to them, then like that you should apply those like same standards across the board, or to most things across the board. And I wouldn't be advocating for banning something, even if like it was showcased that like even if banning vapes maybe was better overall, I would probably be like, well, I put them like recreationally wise, I think they're in the same sort of boat, therefore I probably wouldn't be comfortable banning them anyway.
I also agree with that. I think that like just like the warning label should be enhanced. I think that like is a less regressive way of doing it. If the ban at least isn't temporary, if they're not trying to like correct, right, like essentially like small children vaping. I think that, you know, and like there are real risks associated. We're not fully aware of what they are, but we do know that it's incredibly addictive, right? And like having that at least be like on the label, like having like any of the like health side effects that are currently understood, right, be clearly listed. I think that's the better solution. To educate children, right, and like to increase money in that spending, and like just like, I don't know, tax them more heavily on the products that they are selling more of, and right, put that towards the education of, you know, of people, because I really don't like the limiting of like flavors, because you do get into like, oh, well, should we ban burgers? Oh, should we ban sodas? Like, no, we shouldn't ban sodas, but people should be aware of how fucking bad they are for you in a more widespread.
Sure, it basically turns down to like how can we.
They should perhaps be taxed higher, and the money should be like because that's just like that's like a feel good solution, right? Like you tax it higher, right? So less people buy it on the one hand. On the other hand, right, you also can spend that money towards public programs or, you know, like education, etc.
Sure, I like a part of it boils down to like how much are you willing to like take away people's rights to choose to like engage in stuff that might be harmful to them, right? And like it, like I said, that really comes down to your like position, like politically speaking, like there's consistency.
I'm all for like I guess like it's just a different way of viewing the world, because like even though I do like the concept of consistency, like, or maybe I'm even being consistent in this sense, right? I care most about people being able to like live like, I guess like long like happy lives or whatever, and that's where almost like all my positions come from. And knowing that kids whose like literal brains aren't like fully developed and stuff, right, they're not making like you can say that they're making a choice by doing vape, but they can't fully understand that choice, right? That's where I'm starting to be like, well, like we should probably avoid that then if possible.
Which is why they should be educated, right? And so like temporary measures to ban it while like the education like efforts are ramped up in so that they can be fully aware of the decision that they're making.
I mean, also, if we want to get into that, we can get into like McDonald's and how like McDonald's has specifically things targeted at children that's designed to get them into like eating fast food. That like
Happy Meals.
Yeah, I mean, like how many
I'm
public
so
school
against Happy
students are
Meals.
in the United States are being exposed to like comprehensive nutrition and drug education? Like I doubt there's many.
Yeah, so for me it falls into the consistency thing, and I feel like there's a lot of people who like when it comes to like banning the vape things, I felt like it was a real like mismatch of internal consistency that like I felt like a lot of like left-leaning people like did not like manage to maintain like in any way, shape, or form, right? Like either you are like if you have like a certain standard that you apply to all those recreational things across the board, or you don't have that standard, and then basically it's just like you basically just ones that you like personally or that you don't like personally, or the ones that you're so used to that you're okay with having those instead of like the ones that are new, right? Because that's basically what it boils down to this point. It's like, oh, well, fast food is an old thing, cigarettes and drinking is an old thing we're so used to like having in society, therefore it's fine. But vaping is a new thing, and that's scarier, so therefore we want to get rid of that kind of thing, which just feels like it feels over reals, right?
Yeah, well, for me, it's just a question of practicality, right? So if, let's say these end measures are enacted and like, you know, it just creates like a whole new black market for kids and they're willing to shell out that much money for flavored vapes or whatever, then yeah, I'd be like, we shouldn't ban it then, because now you're just pushing it towards like a more unsafe side. But then if the measures are taken,
but can you really vape? Can you really like I think that's the alcohol analogy. You can't really vape unsafely, right? Like unless it's like jank. Or like, what about the cartridge? Can you like, because you can do that in a very safe and reliable way. Like my friend makes vape juice. It's really not like challenging to actually like make it and flavor it. Like,
well, there is a danger if you're handling nicotine, right?
Not really.
Sure, but the problem is you're going.
Well,
back
no,
to, like,
there absolutely is. If you spill nicotine on your skin, it could absorb through your skin, right? Like there is a danger in that.
Sure, but like you're like dragging it back to like the health system thing, whereas I'm trying to point out that the issue here for me more of I think is in the freedom aspect, right? Of like personal freedoms to engage in that stuff is the bigger issue for me than the health issue.
Yeah.
And like I don't know, I thought you guys were in the land of the free, you know, US.
Well, I don't know. I think it's hard, especially since America has like such a big problem with like education, right? Like, yeah, personally, like I am so for when it comes to obviously like increasing education, getting better education, but that's like a long-term solution. And I'm also interested in short-term solutions till we get there, right? Because like as things stand, it's kind of just like, okay, well, you didn't get the proper education, now you're kind of fucked, buddy. And I just, you know, to me, I find something like troubling in that personally, that it's kind of like, I guess like having people take risky or bad actions because they literally don't know. And by the time it takes them to educate, or by the time it takes like even reform the system, who knows like how much like negative harm they caused to their body because they literally just didn't know.
Sure, but there's also, it's not just education, but like there are like studies out there to showcase that like there's also like elements of like I think there was one like some stuff around like genetic components of like impulsivity and genetic components of like addiction, like kind of thing, where like people like certain people can be genetically predisposed to be addicted to things generally faster, or like people like certain like disorders and whatnot that will make them like more likely to be addicted. But like therefore, should like the general population be should there be a general rule made because there are certain people that have those kind of genetic components and stuff, right? Like I think that's like the problem. It's like the same kind of thing, right? Like for me, it's like we're taking like one example, like a specific, like a subset of people, and applying it to everybody across the board. And that's where like the issue of people are going to come into, right? Like a liberal or libertarian position would like have an issue there, I think.
I guess like this isn't exactly like a super like perfect analogy or whatever, but I'm just now like kind of thinking about like fast food and stuff, right? And although you could make like an argument that there is like a certain like predisposed population of people that are addicted to like sugar or more likely to get addicted to sugar, it's still something that like people in general will get addicted to, period. Like it's a really addicting substance. So when it comes to like the whole question of like, oh, a fast food tax, would you be for it or against it? That's where it goes back to like, well, if people have like other accessible means of food, then yeah, we should like try to like push them away from these like decisions.
Yeah, but those are not analogous though, right? Those are two separate things. A fast food tax is nowhere near the same as a ban. Like
especially because you can just incentivize. You can incentivize like certain like like tax incentivize like companies that are like or specific industries that are promoting healthy food, which will lower the price theoretically in most cases of those foods, or just have like even like government spending programs to just actually lower the prices of the healthy food to make healthy alternatives through the tax. So it's not like that's why the ban doesn't like necessarily equate like on another level. Like it's not it doesn't come down to just like removing it, right? Because tax like you can spend it towards other things, which like it's just more like feels good politics. That's what they did with marijuana as well.
Would you guys be for like a really high like vape tax or something? Out of
I would agree to have an incentivization with regards away from vapes kind of thing, or like or stigmatization with like having like health warnings for the vapes, having a tax on vapes potentially is like a thing. I would agree with that. I would disagree with a ban across the board on it, because I would disagree on a ban with almost regards to anything across the board with that kind of stuff.
So same thing with alcohol?
Yeah, I would disagree with a ban on alcohol.
I have a question. Same deal. Is there any like age specifically, or like across the board? Like, doesn't matter what age?
So the age thing, I believe, comes down to the same thing where we basically have like a thing around age and rights, right? Remember, I think that's a big thing that's a bit different. Like children don't have the same rights as adults. Like you don't have the same exact across the board rights. So that thing there is more like we don't give them the same access to human rights as adults get access to human rights. So like basic universal rights. So in that case, it's not an equivalency for me for children and adults. Like there's not an equivalency of like standing in society. So I guess that doesn't quite hold the same way. And yeah, there's health benefits behind that as well, but it's healthy for children too. Another thing, like, but the comparison wise, like over here in America, over here in New Zealand, not in America, over in New Zealand, the age of drinking is 18. So you can start drinking when you're 18, legally speaking, because that's basically when you stop being a child, effectively. And most illegal stuff here becomes legal at 18, because we have like a consistency across the board there with regards to that is when you are no longer a child, and therefore the level, like you have access to the freedoms an adult is afforded, effectively, to choose that thing for yourself. And then we get like education to make people better, teach people not to engage in that stuff, which, like I said, has been showcased to work because people are no longer smoking or binge drinking as much because of the education that they have. So people, like younger people, are not engaging as much because they are learning it's a bad thing for them to do, kind of thing. So it does be showcased to like kind of work there. But it's more like I guess like there's a bigger conversation to be had, I guess, about like how we view rights regards to like the people's engagement in them.
Yeah, I would rather regulate the distribution or tax the distribution of these products in these corporations before I would ever consider like taxing the consumers or like criminalizing it. I don't know.
It just seems weird to put the burden on like individual consumers as opposed to like the companies that are making the product in the first place that we have a problem with being harmful.
Well, I mean, when you say soda tax, does it inherently mean that like you're right? Like why can't the tax be on the company?
What do you mean?
Well, theoretically, if you tax the company, wouldn't they just
raise the price?
Wouldn't they just raise the price of the product to compensate for that, right?
Oh,
yeah,
that's
but,
fair.
But not always. I think that I think that I think that saying like just because you say soda tax or fast food tax or whatever doesn't mean that you're necessarily it's not a sales tax necessarily, right? Like or is that implicit in a way that I don't understand?
I guess maybe I was assuming a sales tax when I'd probably be more in favor of like a tax on the company that leads to higher sale prices. Yeah.
I would think that would be implicit rather than a sales tax, because I think the sales tax is inherently like you're necessarily shifting it to the consumer, right? Rather than which is like it's like upstream there could be an effect because that less products are being purchased, but right, like why not reverse it and have it so like upstream, the consumer could be affected by a corporate tax because the price is just raised, but not necessarily, right?
So I have a question. I guess like this is just something I thought about a little bit, and it kind of like bothers me at the same time. There's kind of like this underlying question, assumption, or whatever, that you're also kind of like, I guess, punishing poor people in a sense, right? Like if I'm rich, that soda tax isn't gonna affect me. Like I won't give a fuck. I can still like take luxury or enjoy in these like sugary goods and have fun at it.
Right, yeah, that's their right to. It's their right to spend themselves into poverty, but like disincentivizing things, right? It's the same thing as like say more poor people smoked. I don't give a shit if more poor people smoke cigarettes. It's probably the case that more poor people smoke. But like you disincentivize more people from doing it, so there's more net good. Yeah, certain people will spend themselves into into destitution, but just because people are stupid doesn't mean that you should design policy only around the lowest common denominator in every situation, right? Like you have to design it for the most amount of people and the most amount of good, right? The aggregate good that you'll cause from it. And most people, if it's more expensive, prohibitively so, will spend less money, like just on average.
That's a good response to that.
One thing I was kind of wondering about, because you said like moving the tax towards like the corporations instead of like an income or not income tax, a sales tax kind of thing. Does it really like matter though? Like if the price still goes up, it's going to have the same impact on the consumer.
Sure, and that's still worth it. But like, right, like one might not necessarily occur. Right, the company might stop making as much of that product. They probably will raise it, but it might not occur. Whereas the sales tax will always affect the consumer 100% of the time. It always
it could be that like the company has high enough margins that they don't have to increase prices, or they're already whatever.
And they're interested in the optics of it, or they don't sell enough of it that it's a problem, right? So it might not always increase. It probably will, right? Will it increase directly in response? Maybe. So then you have the same situation that you had with the sales tax, right? You have the 1-to-1. Will the company increase it beyond what the sales tax is actually? Will they try and increase their margins when they're being taxed on this? Right? Probably not. Right? So you'll probably you'll have the worst case scenario for the corporate tax being the base case scenario for the sales tax, from my understanding.
Okay. I don't know if there's anything else to really say on this.
Yeah, I feel like we did it.
On this particular topic, I don't think so.
We ran this. I mean, this was actually supposed to be the federal budget thing too.
True.
We segued a bit.
Well, I unless anybody wants to talk about the gun violence research thing, I mean, there's that aspect we didn't really touch on it much, but.
Oh yeah. Seems good.
Yeah, that's
I was gonna say it seems good.
Yeah, seems
Can
good.
finally point to some studies when people are like, well, what are the studies? There's none there. And it's like, we need money. So yeah, it actually.
I mean, do you want an absolute ban on guns? I guess would be the question there. Would anybody in this chat be absolute ban on people having guns?
Probably not. My chat convinced me today that I should be a firearms advocate. So
I wouldn't be an advocate, but I would be against the removal.
Or like against the banning of firearms.
I like the way that Australia handles it, like just like aggressive. It's like aggressive licensing.
Right, New Zealand has one. New Zealand had a change too as well recently from the Christchurch shooting thing. Like,
right. Yeah. You guys like actually. Crisis occurred, and wow, you guys changed your laws. Imagine that.
You can't have assault rifles, that kind of thing, but like they're still able to access like hunting shotguns and rifles. That kind of thing is still completely legal, and you can have those ones.
I don't see any like logical defense for having assault rifles if the argument is that you just wanted to defend yourself from individuals, which is my argument. So yeah, assault rifles seem bad.
I don't think so. I don't think that this is like an effective way to advocate for for gun violence issues. I think if you look at the statistics, most gun violence is committed with handguns, not like assault rifles, right? I don't.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't think it's the type of weapons that people have access to that is the problem in America. I think it's the people that have access to these guns in the first place, right? So I'd rather tackle that issue instead of banning guns because they're scary or whatever.
Like every kind of firearm in Australia.
I have to think about that a bit more.
Every kind of firearm in Australia, like you have to have an active license. Like you have to like go to. It's like you have to like renew it every year. Like you have to have an active course. I think there's. I'm not sure if there's mental evaluation, but like
I think licensing is like definitely a necessary step, and it should have to be renewed regularly. I think that's
and that's what I really like about the Australian system. It's like if you need a gun, if you legit like, because people are like, well, I need a gun, right? Like, well, I want a gun. It's like, well, if you want a gun and you need a gun, right? Like, yes, like Second Amendment, right? Which really is intended for militias, in my opinion. But like jurisprudence aside, right? Like you should be able to submit to a reasonable licensing, right? If that's non-discriminatory if you have legitimate use of a firearm, because not everyone does, and it's not the fucking it's not the 1700s anymore. Not everyone needs a gun in the same way that they might have in like the 18th century. So
I think a really compelling argument against guns is like, what is it? Like when it comes to like gun violence, like a really large portion, if not the highest, is suicide. And that's, that's something like usually like people who commit suicide once don't try to do a second attempt, like across the board. Obviously that's not perfect, but like that's what tends to happen most of the time. And chances are if you commit like suicide through gun, or if you, try to have an attempt with that, it's like pretty fatal. So there's no like kind of like redemption for these people, and it's kind of like 100% permanent. And I think like I'm not for the banning like completely of guns, but I think that's a really interesting and like important argument to make, because you're having like a shit ton of like, especially like guys commit suicide because of easy access to firearms in a sense.
Sure, but then we get into the argument of like, is the main issue there the guns, or is it the suicide that is causing people
like depression? Yeah, I feel like there's an argument to be made there that we should just be focusing on depression in that instance.
Yeah, but
well,
the point
on
is
both, right? And
yeah,
maybe you shouldn't be giving like maybe right like if there's
like,
a proper evaluation process, if there are like massive red flags, someone for instance is like schizophrenic and prone to depression,
or
should
suffering
you
from
allow
PTSD.
them to have or suffering from PTSD? Should you give should you in the licensing process, right? You go like you have like a medical history thing, and if it's not on there, it's not on there. But if it is, and it's a readily available medical fact, right? Should you be licensing them with a gun?
Probably that would have to
not.
probably not, but that would have to depend on like the severity of the depression, right? I'm not sure what the cutoff for that
exactly.
would be. Like
But
I
at
have
least you
depression,
have-
but I'm not going to try to kill myself with a gun.
Exactly, right? But you don't. But you have suicidal tendencies. Or like documented. Have you been hospitalized for suicide?
Well,
Like,
no. Are you saying that would be the cutoff?
No, but like, right? Shouldn't it be? Right? Like,
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think so. That'd probably be a good place to limit it. Well, I don't know, because like, what sort of time frame would we make the cutoff for? Like, how recently should you have tried to have, like,
maybe in the past year,
or
like you can maybe in the past year if we have more
ever.
like comprehensive. If we have more comprehensive mental health care as well, right? Like it would be less of an issue. But say you're aware of whether or not this person has access to like mental health treatment, so it becomes a little impractical because this licensing would have to be so in depth in a way that like is not like practically feasible. So like that's fair. But like like other problems are solved then by having consistent access to mental health care, right? And then you can have that as a like it's not a question. Okay, does this person have a therapist?
Also,
does this person have a psychiatrist?
Also, even off the bat, though, that kind of licensing would require a really comprehensive mental health system.
It's
off
true.
The bat. To be able to like, because I mean, there's a lot of people there who have like mental health and stuff in like in America who have like civilization that have no like it's like not recorded or not like addressed in any way, shape, or form to the point that like it would be able to be found if they were doing like ID checks for it and stuff, right? Because of the fact that like the mental health system is so like poorly administrated over there.
Yeah, so no, it's actually really like I used to work in marketing for pharmaceuticals, and it was really like I worked in rare disease, and it's really really hard to actually like most of our marketing was finding patients, right, like who were suffering from this disease without knowing it, and finding like records and like having specialists actually be able to identify cases of acute hepatic porphyria was really difficult because of the like lack of centralization of medical records in this country, because of people's like people just I actually don't know why. It's like a privacy issue, I guess, because it's like not like kept in centralized databases, but it makes it like very practically hard for things like this and like certain like types of medicine.
People's like medical history can't be shared unless requested and gone through like the proper channels and stuff like that, right?
Yeah. So I would
because of HIPAA.
Even if it's anonymized, like you can't anonymize it.
Yeah, from like a political position, I would like always focus on like the mental health like improvements first before I go into like gun licensing and stuff. I think it would just make way more sense to go like gun mental health first and then move on to that as like an issue.
Let me see. Sorry, I'm looking at DMs. I missed something.
Oh, MindWaves, can I ask you a quick question so I can? I'm trying to like get you to pull me over to the automatic weapons are okay thing. So like, it seems like it's a lot easier to execute like a mass shooting with an automatic firearm.
Weapons are not.
What's your response
weapons are
to
not
that?
legal. Like
automatic.
Well,
I think you're talking about like semi-automatic.
I'm just speaking like in a vacuum or we can say semi-automatic. I'm just speaking kind of in a vacuum though. Like.
Yeah, definitely. Like if you're talking about like AR-15s or AKs or whatever, like these guns that you see like mass shooters use, right? And you're talking about like, don't these seem like more lethal, right? Or like you're able to like kill more people more efficiently?
Yeah, that's my concern at least, but I know that might be sort of like a arbitrary concern.
Sure. I mean, I don't know how much truth there is to that, but even if there is truth to that, I think that even if I grant that, I that's not something that I really care about. Obviously, I think that it's not the fact that these people have access to deadlier weapons. It's the fact that they have access to these weapons, period, right?
Sure,
if they had access to a firearm or just like a revolver or like a shotgun, I would be equally as worried, right? They might not be as lethal, but that's like that is the problem, right? So
yeah, that's totally fair. That's a good response.
From what I've read, they still haven't made a completely comprehensive like psychoanalysis or whatever of like the typical gun shooter. So this is like a completely unprofessional and anecdotal experience, just prefacing. But it seems like the majority of people who commit mass shootings tend to be on the younger age, right? Tend to be like 25 or younger. Tend to be like white males. And I guess the point that I'm trying to get at here is that especially when it comes to like the 8 to 21 range or even higher, right? All right, but let's focus specifically on 18 to 21. I think that it's going to be a lot easier for those kids to get, maybe impulse buy something from Walmart or, have easy access there and not think anybody's going to like really harass them over it because it's fucking legal. And then carry out their act. And then whether they had to go and argue with the Mexican gun cartel or whatever to get their semi-automatic weapon, right? So I do think like, there has to be like more research done with it, which maybe like this will produce that more research. But yeah, I do think that there's something to be thought of there, that it would be a deterrent for these like kind of young, impulsive people who are obviously like going through major life changes, right? When you're 18, you're graduating from high school, that can easily be like a trigger, or 21 also.
But if they have a handgun versus an AR-15, does that change? Like if someone wants to commit harm, like are they really going to sit down there and be like, well, if I can only kill X amount of people, if like my magazine size is not X amount of bullets, like am I really going to go through with this murder suicide? I don't know if this is worth it if it's only killing 17 people versus 37. Like no one.
Well,
no one's going
for that. That's not the point. Well, that's not the point. The point is that you're lowering the magazine size so that less people can be harmed by that.
Which I'm in support of.
I don't think that these are popular like policies either. I don't think that most people want magazine like regulations or.
It just seems like an instance where somebody's like taking the effort to kill people already. I don't know if like. I don't know how much magazine size is going to end up making a difference.
Yeah, exactly. Because you could just carry 2 fucking magazines and practice how to switch the magazines. Like you're not, if you really want the means to do it, the means are there. It's about preventing, right? Like preventing it in the first place, because there's going to be another weapon. If that's not going to happen, we're going to ban knives as well.
Well, right? The point is harm reduction.
Well, but what if someone trains how to use a magazine and they then use like 2 30-round magazines instead of 2 10-round magazines?
Obviously, the amount of harm that can be caused is much higher, right? Like, but like given the amount of shootings that actually occur, right? So like if you would actually address the root of the problem rather than like address the magazine size, and you like give like comprehensive mental health care to people in this country and like make it like have some kind of licensing and make it so that you can't buy them at gun shows and shit. I think that's far more relevant to like reducing right like harmful outcomes in terms of mass shootings than reducing the magazine size, because you're just like at that point you're just like, well, people are going to die, but let's reduce the harm of when people do die, right? Like by magazine size. I really don't think that that's like, as much as it's like there's only so much political capital that you have towards like implementing policy. I think that it's a waste to focus on to try and pass a policy like that. I think you go for comprehensive like licensing changes rather than going for small like half-ass like magazine size changes.
I fucking cringed. I cringed so hard when I saw liberals celebrating the ban of bump stocks. I was like, well, this doesn't further our goals at all. Like, okay, big fucking deal. An accessory is banned. Like, and what? We still have fucking problems, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
It's like you only have so much political capital. People will only stay outraged and angry for so long. It's better to keep them. And this is why I'm not fully that's why I don't like establishment Democrats, and why I'm not fully like, oh, like I'll vote for, like I'm more inclined to not vote for Biden than I would. Like I'm a lot less excited to, right? And I probably still would, right? Because it's extreme. But if it were a different Republican candidate, I might not vote if it were Biden versus, like typical red boy, because I wouldn't really care. Because I'm not here for incremental change. I'd rather the Democratic Party suffer as a result of its terrible fucking establishmentarianism, right? Than like elect leaders that they have that are like fucking lukewarm as shit, and encourage the party to keep giving us those kinds of leaders unless it's incredibly dire. In the same way that like having like policies that just placate the people on gun violence and people that like they move on to the next thing. It's shitty, right? And like magazine size changes are a policy in that sphere for me.
There's definitely a part of me that's low-key accelerationist in that sense. But it's kind of true. There is an argument to be made there that you're kind of incentivizing the Democratic Party to just continue like churning out those candidates because at the end of the day they'll vote for us because it's not red. And like I understand that Trump is just like a whole other level and that he is like literally like a threat to American democracy. Let's make like jokes about third term. But just because like I think that way, I can't blame my other like fellow people around my age who don't think that way or who are like, yeah, let's just like burn this shit to the ground already. So yeah, that's.
And I mean, to be fair to them, I was a lot more on that. Like, I almost didn't vote for Hillary because I was really of the opinion that our democracy could endure. In the end, I did, right? Like, but I really did think like at certain points I was like, well, the DNC fucked over Bernie, right? I really wanted this kind of change. Do I reward this behavior? And then I sat down and I thought, well, I think that our democracy and our system and our constitution and our checks and balances can withstand Donald Trump. And clearly they cannot. So, yeah, unlucky, I guess. I really thought that was the case, and I still didn't act on it. But I think that like people were a lot more justifiable in thinking that previously because it hadn't really been tested in a while, not really since Nixon, right? So I think that it was much more justifiable in the past, and I think that for some people who still believe it, right, I think that maybe it's like not entirely unjustifiable to believe in the democracy beyond, or the republic, and right, like the democratic nature of it, and like sort of the steadfastness of it beyond the will of one man and the shitty party that's behind him, right?
Yeah, I just think that I think it's definitely a part of like how much the Republican Party has changed, right? Like since Trump has gotten elected, the Republican Party has just gone like much more radical. And you can make an argument that it was already getting like that by the end of Obama's term with like Mitch McConnell. But I just think that like Trump took it to this whole other new level. Because I would even make an argument that if it was like the same Republican Party before Trump, with the exception of like Mitch McConnell, then by the time that or like when all this shit would be happening, then we might even get like a full impeachment and rejection, right? Like a full eviction. But that obviously isn't going to happen. The Republican Party has decided to put all their coins into the Trump basket.
So what makes you say that the Republican Party has like switched like platforms or like shifted like in some ways after like Trump?
Well, for one, like you still had like a lot of Republican candidates that while like on stage, they were totally like, kind of bashing on Trump or saying like this guy can't be elected, like we shouldn't elect him. And you can make an argument that was like, oh, it was just primary running or whatever. But you even had people who weren't running in the primaries, like talking about like, no, this guy's like dangerous. And then it wasn't until after he got in and you kind of had like a red wave with that you suddenly had everybody thinking like, holy shit, the only reason I got elected into like the House or the Senate was because like Trump brought in so much like enthusiasm and shit. And now you have people who, are like blatantly contradicting themselves from like stances that were like kind of long held or before. I forget like the exact names and policies. I can find those in a second. That just like have kind of done a complete like 180 because they truly think that the reason I'm in here right now is because Donald Trump, because Donald Trump was able to motivate so many people. So I think that's where it's kind of like come to reliance to that. If you break from the status quo, if you break from the Trump train, you're not gonna get elected next year, or next whatever. You're gonna have Fox News calling you a fucking filthy socialist lefty. You're gonna have everybody talking about how you're part of the freaking deep state. How dare you? And yeah, I think that's where you see like the biggest shift, that now you have like not like kind of an idealization in a sense, right? Like this guy is like low-key the fucking lord and savior of this party.
I get what you mean in that like a lot of like governors and representatives from like certain states that have like a lot of Trump supporters probably had to like shift positions on certain things or like go back and forth on whether or not they support Trump. I think that's absolutely true. But I don't think that it really means anything at the end of the day in terms of actually like what the Republicans are pushing on their platform on like a day-to-day basis, right? So
or even how they're engaging in like political discourse. It really is. It's par for the course, really. Like they would do this, and now you're noticing it because it's behind someone who is legitimately, like in a lot of cases, like very morally and ethically and just like, I don't know, like racially, like abhorrent as you know, like in terms like just in terms of the shit that he's spewing, the way that he's acting, that they stand behind that because it's not all of the tenets of the Republican Party wrapped in the happy-go-lucky, you know, George W. Right? Like it's not there's no charisma there. It's like anti-charisma, and so you're noticing it more because it seems so much more, or at least like I'll speak for myself. It seems more vile. It seems like cartoonishly evil now, whereas it always has been. But it's
basically like the same present but wrapped in a prettier, more attractive wrapping, right? Like that's basically like Trump. I don't think Trump is like an exception. I think he is a Republican, and like the stuff he's pushing is Republican policy. Like it's
par for the course Republican policy, except for the social like the weirdness of the like the Armenian genocide rejection and shit like that, right? Like
I mean, for example,
he
like
does weird shit to distract while he gets Republican policies passed, right? So he's useful to them.
I would argue that like definitely it's part of the course that right conservatism like historically is about keeping the status quo, and usually like we look at history, the status quo isn't really nice, you know. So I agree with that to a certain extent, but I think it's important to keep in mind that when Donald Trump was running, he was not a Republican, right? He was an outsider and a nasty one at that. And now that he got the presidency, he's become now I guess like the new Republican or whatever, or the real Republican, whatever phrase you want to put it in. So I. But
he also defined himself as a Republican. He said he was outside the establishment, but he defined himself as a Republican. Like he didn't take that moniker. Whereas like when you compare it to someone like Bernie, who doesn't, he refuses the moniker. He's not a Democrat, and he insists on it. Right. Yeah, whereas Trump insists that he is Republican. Even during the campaign, he said he was an outsider to the Republican Party, but still a Republican. Right.
Yeah, but like our establishment Republicans at least still seem to like really dislike him, and even like I would even dare to say hate him, right? It wasn't like, I don't know, let's take Ted Cruz, Jeb Bush, and Marco Rubio, like their relations with each other. It was radically different than the relations to Donald Trump when everybody was running, right? So I definitely do think that there's something to be said about like how I guess the best phrase or terminology is that he's made actions that would have seemed unacceptable or like very shady before acceptable kind of under like the Republican Party guys, if that makes any sense, right? So
which they would have done, which I argue they would have done had the political landscape supported a candidate like Trump ever before, right? Like this blatant I don't know, like the blatant misinformation and propaganda campaigns are something that they've participated in like for a very long time, and just hasn't been as like obvious because they haven't had the candidate for it. If they needed to support this guy, they didn't want it to be this obvious. That's why the establishment opposed Trump, in my opinion, right? They didn't want it. They want this like nice, like nicely packaged, right, easy to swallow, like Republican, you know, charisma, and but like still all of their policies beneath it. What they got is someone who is very obvious about what he does, how he thinks, and how he feels and what he thinks, right, and what he's doing. So you like they can't be as backhanded about it, and it's actually been effective for them. But I would still argue that like they would have done it had it been the past. So it's not an essential change. It is a change in practice, but not in their theory, not in their like not in their guidebooks, not in their playbooks.
Yeah,
everything else
I do
think
the same. Yeah, go ahead, Pixie.
I was just gonna say, like, I guess like the reason why I was like trying to emphasize this so much is because it makes sense, even if you were well versed in politics in 2016, to make the argument like, oh yeah, our democracy can withstand, because like, you know, Republicans don't want this guy either very much. You know, he seems to like not be like very aligned with their playbook.
And we thought they were above it. We actually thought that they were legitimately above like moral degeneracy because they said they were, and we believed them, and that's right. Like they they do not operate in an intellectually honest way with the propaganda that they spew, which is something that we've become intimately aware of like in the past 4 years, which is unlucky, I guess, right? It's you know, it's bad. It's really bad. And I didn't think that it was this bad. I thought that there was more like of a moral backbone in the Republican Party than there actually is. And I'm very disappointed to have been proven wrong, right? Like in a very like in a way that I wasn't pessimistic about like two-party politics in the way that I am now. Like I am very, very, very convinced that the Republicans are cartoonishly evil, which is a very bad like.
Yeah.
It's like bad to live in a political system where you believe that.
Yeah, I think when we're talking about establishment politics, it's always going to be naive to think that there's any sort of morality in play here. It's goal orientated, right? And oftentimes the goals on both sides is pretty much aligned in favor of the elite, right?
And I was woken up to that naivety, and it sucks. Like it really does. Like it's an important thing to learn and know and understand, but it's just you think you're taught and you're, I don't know, like indoctrinated to think that the country runs a certain way and that there is a certain amount of like I don't know, like pride and like pride not in like a personal sense, but pride in the country and like I don't know, like adherence to ethics and like general moral character, I guess.
Sure.
That there is not, right? You think that at least like a very, very, not a lot, right? Not this overwhelming amount, but this like very, very small amount that you think is like going to persist, and it's just not there.
Well, it's because that's their messaging, right? That's what they signal to their base oftentimes is these virtues, but they never adhere to them. Yeah.
Yeah, but even in like the smallest possible form, it's not like this is like grandiose, like you know, like very long standing or expressive sort of implementation of it. It's just like a very basic, like adultering, lying, right? Like cheating, stealing, you know, like by all their accounts, even on the very most basic levels, scum kind of like material being propped up. It's like you like even like really like this much, like really like that's where it goes for me anyway.
Yeah. I did want to go ahead and say what's up, Ahrelevant. Good to have you in here, my dude.
I'm back.
And also Ren, thanks for joining us again. Why did you join us again, Rem? I just have to ask.
I was told there's communism going on.
Oh, so you mute your mic and more by, please.